Okay, great. So hello to everyone that's slowly coming in today. Great. We'll just wait another minute, I think, while we just get a few more participants here. Thank you everyone for joining and tuning in today. I know it's end of the week and everyone has a lot of work that they're wrapping up on, so we're really grateful today. Great. Perfect. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and just get started here. So I'm going to just give a brief introduction and then we'll just take it away to our lovely speaker today. So I just want to start by saying I'm located here in Toronto, Ontario. So I'd like to acknowledge the land I and others joining us today are on. And it's the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. I also want to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today I encourage all of you to take some time to reflect on the land that you are residing on, since we have individuals watching across different provinces, either tuning in live or tuning in later with the recording at a later time. So I just want to introduce our webinar today. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Today we have CLIO's webinar is on online courses, but more specifically, we're going to explore CLIO's online course for community workers as a main focus. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today, who is Michelle Cater. She is the Community Training and Outreach Manager at CLIO, and she's worked as an educator in the nonprofit sector for many, many years. She draws on her academic background in both law and education in her current role, and over the past several years, she's developed curricula in legal information and has presented to thousands of community workers across the province of Ontario. So we're very lucky to have Michelle with us today, and thank you, Michelle, for making time in your very busy schedule for us.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks for inviting me, Hannah, and it's nice to be on this side of things.
Exactly.
As the Community Training and Outreach Manager, I usually, or before pre-COVID, I did a lot of in-person work around the province, and so I presented workshops in the north and the east and southwest and in central Ontario and lots of the GTA. So it's new for me to do this, but of course I've been doing it since March. So really
Already a
pleased
pro. Yeah, you're already a pro.
And so I'm here, to talk about the online course that we did. And so I'm just going to pull up, have some slides that if people want them afterwards, Hannah can make them available, or I can make them available to you. So CLIO's online course was called, it's called Building Skills in Legal Information and Referral. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the background, how we developed it, sort of the timeline, and things that we learned and some of the feedback that we got. So I think that Hannah was saying, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A or the chat, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions.
Exactly, that's right, Michelle. And I just want to reiterate as well that we are recording today's session. So for anyone who isn't able to obviously tune in live, that will be passed along to everyone. And like Michelle said, along with her slides, so and any other resources that kind of come up today. Obviously, if you have colleagues that weren't able to make it live, feel free to pass that along. And absolutely, like Michelle said, use the Q&A or the chat function to ask any questions, or if you have any comments, and we have time at the end, or if there's anything to sort of address, we can do that at the end of the webinar. So that's it.
Okay. So why an online course for community workers? Well, I think, I'm probably speaking to a group of people who are interested in online courses and interested in online learning, and many of you have probably done online courses. And in terms of, and that many of you know, my first point here, that there was a Trusted Help report done in 2018 that followed up on reports from a couple of years before that, called the Trusted Help Report. And there was research that really showed that community workers, and I'm using that as a broad term, are approached by people for help with legal problems, or with problems that may have a legal aspect. And so when I use the term community workers, I know there's lots of different terms: trusted intermediary, frontline worker, service provider, social service worker, where we used a very broad definition when we rolled out the course, which we didn't initially to community workers, but when we rolled it out, so they could have been, people in the health sector, in the settlement sector, people who were working as peer advocates, people who are working as volunteers, people who are working in food security, and violence against women centers, so all sorts of community workers. And so, there's evidence that because they're being called upon to do this work, many of them are looking for training because they want to do it well. They want to, learn about the parts of their job that they haven't been trained for. So we were always talking to people who were not trained as lawyers or paralegals or community legal workers. So we know that they needed some training in order to help them do that better. And the Trusted Help Report recommended using online delivery systems because you're able to reach more people in so many different spaces. And it also recommended using practical learning tools. And we know that adult learners are really looking for education that's going to be very practical and help them right away. And we also were looking to reach people who had not been well supported thus far. And so what we did was in 2015, so we're already going back a couple of years, but so this is kind of a timeline of how we developed the course. And as you can see on the far left, it was actually at the very end of 2015, we had an event where a few clinics and organizations got together, OGEN and CLEO and CALC, the Community Advocacy Legal Center in Belleville. And we brought library staff and legal workers and lawyers together to talk about access to justice and talk about how libraries, both public and law libraries, could be an increased place where access to justice could happen in practical ways. And what came out, this course, that the seeds of this course was really in that 2015 meeting and bringing together those people. And so we identified, library staff as being the pilot group for this course. And that also came out of partnerships, people that Julie Matthews, our executive director, and I met at that meeting in 2015. So we met the executive director of the Ontario Library Association, that's OLA, and SOLS, Southern Ontario Library Service. So that's the second point there. By about March of 2016, we kind of solidified these partnerships. At the time, we thought that we were going to use the Ontario Library Association platform for the course. That was sort of initially what we thought. That didn't end up happening for a very good reason, which we'll get to in a little bit. But so we did solidify the partners then. And we spent a long time working on our application with the Law Foundation. And we did receive the funding, I guess, the beginning of July of 2016. And then you'll see number 4, develop curriculum. Took us almost a year to develop the curriculum, which was content as well as videos for the course. And so that really was the bulk of time of our process, was developing all of the content for the course. And I'm going to break that down in the next slide, talk a little bit more about the steps that we took there, what had to be done there. And then part of that development was learning that we were going to use a platform that was quite different from the one that the Ontario Library Association had. And so learning about that platform. And number 5 was uploading the curriculum to this new online platform, working with the business that we hired to do that. And then, of course, promoting the course, and registration was a bit of a process, a learning process. And then we launched the course finally at the end of September 2017. So the first 3 courses that were offered, let's say that, so the funding application involved 2 editions of the course. So it was the one that was rolled out in the fall of 2017. And then what we did was evaluate over the winter, in December through kind of beginning of March. We evaluated what worked using kind of an extensive survey with the course participants, and used their feedback and all of the learnings that I had accumulated, and Julie had accumulated over the time to kind of tweak the course and modify and improve it. And then we offered our second edition in the spring of 2018. And then, of course, we did an evaluation and a final report to the Law Foundation, and that was the end of their funding. But we have been able to roll out 3 more editions of the course, one in spring of 2019, one in the fall of 2019, and one just last winter of 2020, which was an interesting challenge once COVID hit. But since it was online, we were able to complete it. So that's sort of the overall timeline. And you can see that the developing the curriculum, the uploading curriculum, and the evaluation were the kind of the longest parts of that timeline. And then just to unpack the steps in developing the course a little bit more, what we did was hire an instructional designer who worked with 1 or 2 other people. And her name is Michelle Sangara. She works with a company called the Alina Group. And she really helped us to look at the content, look at our legal capability content, the in-person workshops that I had been doing for years, and rethink it for an online learning environment. And that took quite a while. She had not worked in the legal sphere before, and I had not worked in the online learning sphere before. And so learning the language and talking to each other was a really important piece of it for us to really understand what the online learning world is like. And she helped us to, rethink how we could really pick the essential parts of the learnings and put them into engaging material for online learning. And so we worked together and finally got to the fact that there was going to be sort of the content that we had. We were going to create 8 learning modules. And then we created sort of an overall arc, a learning arc for all of the modules. And it was really based on, legal information and legal referrals, so that each of the modules sort of touched on. Actually, it was a 4-step process. It was detecting legal problems, understanding legal information, finding people legal information, then referring them for legal help. So we sort of developed this 4-step process, which came up in all of the modules that we had. So it was a really nice thread. And I do recommend sort of finding some kind of learning thread that goes through all of the learning modules if you're looking at a multi-module course. And then we kind of solidified and wrote the content that was going to be in the video part of the course. And then we engaged 4 subject matter experts to help us create videos, 4 videos, 1 each in 4 different areas of law. So it was the 4 areas that in a study done with library staff had been the 4 areas that were the most, where most legal problems were coming up for library staff. So it was housing law, employment, family law, and consumer law. And so we hired those 4 subject matter experts, 3 of whom worked in the community legal clinic system in Ontario, and 1 who was a private bar family lawyer who we had worked with before on our Steps to Justice site. And part of that working on the development of the course was also designing the activities for assessment and for practice for people, and then kind of just bringing it all together and finalizing it. So that was the 11-month or almost a year process, which took us from sort of a 3-hour in-person workshop on legal capability to the 8-module course. And then in terms of what the content that actually came out of it, the first 4 modules were sort of talking about those 4 steps that I mentioned: detecting legal problems, finding good legal information and referrals, and also learning the difference between legal information and advice. We at Clio, a lot due to Julie Matthews' research and David Wiseman's research on community justice help, are talking about legal information and advice quite differently now. We have sort of a different framework, but the course material was before, obviously, that research that just came out. And so we were speaking about it a little more as a dichotomy in the course. which sort of brings up an interesting point about the shelf life of courses where you have information and then more research is done and new learnings are made. And so how hard or easy it can be to sort of tweak your information. And then the second 4 modules on the course were those ones, each one on one legal topic, employment, family, housing, and consumer. And then we had each module, as well as having the video, it had some short exercises, some kind of one longer exercise, and some quizzes. The case scenarios were, we offered sort of a case scenario with each module as a practice, and then one that was more assessed. By assessed, I don't mean that we graded it. This wasn't a course that we got any, wasn't certified by a university or a college. It was Clio assessing it, which meant me, I was the instructor for the course. So I was doing assessment, and basically assessment for understanding and really giving feedback to people on their learnings and what they were understanding from the content. We also, for the first 2 courses that were part of the LFO funding, we also had discussion groups as part of the content. The discussion groups, we would pose a question every week. They weren't mandatory. Some of the assessments were mandatory, but the discussion groups weren't. And it was with the hopes of kind of creating a community of support for people who were taking the course, not just that the support that would be during the course, but the hope was to create a bit of a community of library staff across the province that would go that I would have a longer life than the course, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. And then the last component was that we developed some tip sheets to supplement the content, and so people had sort of a takeaway for each of the first four modules on legal capability. They had something to take away with them that they could download and print and share with their colleagues or other people. So that they didn't have to, take notes madly while they were listening to the videos, or listen to them again and again. There was some really hearty takeaways for them. So that's sort of describing the overall content of the course. And so as I said, we piloted the course over 2 8-week periods, so the autumn of 2017 and the spring of 2018. And all of the people in those courses were library staff across, that were from different libraries across the province. I should say also all public libraries. We really weren't, I think there might have been one person from a law library, but it was really much more focused on people who work in public libraries that are open to the public, where people can come in and ask lots of questions. And then, as I said, we offered 3 more editions of the course. The first one of those was only to library staff. And then the next 2, we opened up to this broader group of community workers. So in total, we had 128 participants that completed it. So it was an average of about 25 per course, just over that. I don't have the stats here today on representation from different parts of the province, but we did have a very good distribution, people from Southwest, Central, East, GTA, and the North, which was great. And then everyone received both kind of feedback from me on the more hardy parts of the assessments. And then at the end, people who completed all the modules received what we called a legal information referral specialist certificate that was signed by Clio. So that's sort of the who, what, and when. And then I thought I would just take you now online to show you some of the elements of the course, so you kind of have a sense of what it was. So this kind of just shows you that, or this picture just shows you that people could complete it on their desktop, on their laptop, on their mobile device, on their iPad. So we made sure that it was accessible on different platforms. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and then I'll share my, go to the internet here and go to the course page. So I've already logged in, so we're sort of seeing the course landing page here. And the idea up here on the left, the first thing you can see that's in orange right now is My Courses. So the idea was that we worked with the instructional designers the people that she works with to develop the website. So that was a company called LearnBase, and LearnBase, they're actually located in BC. So everything we did was virtual. So I actually had heard of Zoom back in 2017. I had my first Zoom meeting with the head of LearnBase. And at the time I was like, Zoom, what's Zoom? I didn't know what Zoom was. Anyway, so I had worked with them, LearnBase, to bring all the content, and they built out the site, and we went back and forth about, how the site would look, and did lots of tweaks. And the idea was that Clio could use this website if we wanted to develop more courses, and we still are able to. And so that's why it says my courses. Only one course shows here, as you can see, just the building skills and legal information, because we haven't had a chance to develop more courses yet. And so that's the my courses. And then there's a place for people to get messages from me or other people in the course. People want to build out their profile with, a bio and a picture and those kinds of things. Settings was mostly for changing your password. And then we did a navigation guide, which was a couple-minute video that explained how to use the course, how to engage with the course. Some people who were very savvy and had done online courses had no trouble with navigating and figuring out how to, how to engage with the course. And then we also had people who really were actually, some were even quite new to the internet, and so they had more difficulty with figuring it out. And so the navigation guide, which we didn't do for the first few editions, we realized we really need kind of a video that shows people and walks people through how to engage with it. So that was kind of a new improvement that we made as time went along. And so I'll just go into the course. And so you can see sort of there's the welcome page, and it tells you a little bit about the course, the learning objectives, and then it has information about the, how things will be assessed, and of course our partners and the funder for the course. And at the top here, you can see we had a place where we could put the faculty of the course, so the lawyers and myself, people that developed the curriculum, and my colleague Christina Bursalis, who helped with the tip sheets. So we had sort of a place for faculty. And then Clio was also new to many of the library staff that were on this course, and even some of the community workers. And so we had sort of a place to just tell people what Clio was about. So we had kind of those at the top, and admin resources is more for the back end for the instructor to remember how to do certain things. So we'll go back to courses and back into the course. And then I'll just show you two examples of the modules. So if we scroll down here, I'm just going to go into module 2. So module 2 was called Building a Foundation, Understanding Legal Information. So if I click on that module, at the top, it talks about the specific things you'll learn in this module, and then key questions that you'll be able to answer. So we're really trying to use strong adult education principles to lay out what people will learn and what the expectations are. So people don't go into a module and say, this is all words, I don't understand what I'm gonna be getting out of it. So we were trying to use very tried and true educational principles. And then it tells you how to engage with the module. And then this is really the whole, I'm gonna try to make it a little bit bigger. Each module screen looked like. So this part was a video, which I'll play for a couple seconds. And then there was a video index, so that if people wanted to watch the whole video and then go back and see a certain part, it was like the chapters, what chapter did they have to go to, and it would jump to that part so they didn't have to watch the whole thing again. And each video was about 10 to 15 minutes. So they weren't really heavy videos. And the idea was that someone who was working full-time as a library staff or as a community worker in the later editions would be able to fit this in to do one module each week. And it was sort of all over the map in terms of people, when people did it. Sometimes I could see that people submitted their work at 2 a.m, or sometimes people were allowed to do it from work. It was part of their work, or some people were doing it on their lunch hour. So we did find out, and this was part of the feedback, that most people spent about 1 to 2 hours a week on it. So which we felt was a very doable amount of time for someone who was working full-time or higher part-time hours. And so each module had a video with it, and then it had what's called the workbook section. And so the workbook section had sort of a few kind of introductory questions. So you can see this first question was on types of requests for legal resources. So the learner would click on it, and it would be asked, question, what kinds of requests have you had for legal resources in your work? And people would enter their answer there, and then they could submit it. So all of these different, each number had a different question in it. And some of them are questions, some of them were quizzes, and some of them were case scenarios. What we didn't anticipate, and I guess I shared this a little bit at the end of the presentation, was that it took a lot of time for one instructor to give feedback to every participant for every single question. And remember, initially there was about 30 people in each course, and then there was an attrition rate probably of about 4 or 5 people. So not everybody actually finished the course for various reasons, whether something personal happened or they got transferred to a different library and this wasn't part of what they could do anymore. So there were different reasons why sometimes people weren't able to finish it. But it was a lot of work for one instructor to give all of the feedback that we had initially promised. So after the first edition, what we did was we developed what we called answer guides. You can see it here, and that wasn't on the first edition. So the answer guide provided answers to all of the previous questions. And what we did was we just gave a kind of a comprehensive assessment and feedback on what we called the written submission, which for most modules was a case scenario, and they had to, people had to detect the legal problems, go online, find reliable legal information, make a good referral, explain their reasoning why they found the information was reliable, explain why they chose the referral that they did. And so that was what we found, was that in terms of, how reasonable it was to provide individualized feedback, it really was became really only possible for us to give feedback on that one kind of most important piece for each module, where they brought all the skills they had learned together. And then there was kind of a simpler, shorter quiz for each module as well. So I had said I was going to show you how the video worked. This video has me in it because I was the one.
In Module 1, we did a lot of work to understand the context in which we're doing this work. And we talked about legal problems, what they are, how they arise, how people experience them, and why they're complicated.
So I'm just going to stop here just to say that you can see here, you can also jump ahead 15 seconds or back 15 seconds. As I said, you can jump ahead to, to another chapter. And then the other thing is that I'm not a trained, as you can probably tell, I'm not a trained, video, presenter. And so it was definitely some work for me and for the legal experts to present the information and be filmed while we were presenting it. We had to do, lots of preparation, lots of takes. Of course, we had an editor who, would edit out the bad takes and things. And so it was a real process. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work, but we were really pleased with the results in the end. Some of the legal experts, there were 4 legal experts, and we had to make sure that they were okay being on camera. But I think when they initially signed on for it, they weren't aware that it was going to be them, sort of in this room for a couple of hours, going over a script and saying lines. So it was a part that we felt was important to the course to present the information in this way. but it was a challenge for people who are not used to being filmed to present the information in this way. We didn't have a teleprompter, so we weren't able to read a script. We had to sort of know what we were talking about, and that was how we felt it would be more natural and more understandable, was if people were sort of using their own words that they had thought about a lot before in order to present the information. So that's sort of what each module looked like. And then at the bottom, you can see that we had these options: save my notes. So if people only had time to work on it for 15 minutes at a time, then they could save what they did and then come back to it later and wouldn't be gone. When they needed to submit it for feedback to me, they click on submit for feedback. And then they could also print and download it so that they could save the work they did, so that it just didn't submit to me and then it was gone, so that they could gather it and share it and look back on it and continue to learn from it. So those are sort of all the features I think that are important to see about the course. We didn't have a huge amount of scope for changing the way that the site looked and the features that were offered on the site. So obviously all of the content we could change, the videos, all of the words that you see, and all the content obviously we could change. But this setup in terms of the video being on top and the workbook being on the bottom and the sidebar being on the side, there were some options, some extra options that we could have had. But there was, that was one of the things with working with this company called LearnBase, who has their own platform, was that we were sort of took their shell and worked with them to put our content into that shell. So that was, that's just something to know about working with LearnBase or working with a company that has a specific online platform. So I'm going to stop sharing that and just go to my a few more slides that I have to share. And I hope I'm not putting people to sleep. It's hard for me because I can't see if there's any questions or anything. Whoops, sorry about that. I'll try that again. Okay, so just wanted to share with you some of the participant comments at the very start of the course. So this would have been after the first module, talking about, what are you hoping to learn? What are the things that you need help with? So we got comments like, navigating legal documents, advice, knowledge, and/or resources has always felt like walking through a labyrinth blindfolded. As such, my comfort and confidence in helping people with their legal problems has always felt way out of my realm of ability or knowledge. And I'm not going to read the other two comments, but if you're interested in the slides, you can see them after. But it's basically about how daunting and complicated the legal system is, and legal information can be. And so a lot of them are saying, how can I help people with legal information when I don't even understand it? I don't know where to find it. The word labyrinth doesn't cast the law in a very good light, but we those of us who do the work that we do and that you do know that the law can be very complicated, and so it's all about unpacking it. And so this is kind of a long comment to share at the end, but one of the comments that we got at the end of the course, and a lot of the comments reflected something like this. I have learned so much. I feel much more confident in my understanding of legal problems and how to detect, respond, and refer customers who are facing legal issues. Libraries play a significant role in their communities and as part of an integrated network of services to empower citizens. The skills and tools I have acquired have already proved to be of personal value, and I look forward to sharing the tips and resources I have learned with other staff so that we can take a team approach to supporting community members who are facing legal problems. I'm excited to be able to apply my new skills and knowledge with greater confidence. So that was, I think that it was an open-ended question, what have you learned after the course? And so, this was a comment that really showed us that the work that we had put in and the goals that we had really came to fruition for learners in the course. And just in terms of some overall feedback from, this is, I think these percentages are from the the report that we did that was kind of over the 5 courses that we've done so far. So 98% said they feel more confident in helping people with legal problems. 93% gave the course either a 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. 100% liked that it was self-paced. So even though the idea was that it was an 8-week course, that they were to do 1 module each week, many of them took longer than 8 weeks. They, you know, in their lives, they might not have been able to manage 1 module each week. They weren't allowed to go ahead. What I wanted to do was keep them sort of together as a group as much as possible, mostly for that discussion group piece of it. The idea was if, you know, most people were on module 1 together, they could have a fruitful discussion about module 1. If they were on module 4, they could have a fruitful discussion on module 4. So we didn't let people go ahead of themselves and be like, finish the course in 2 weeks. Not that anyone necessarily asked to do that. But the idea was that they didn't, that they could mostly pace themselves. And that a lot of the learners said both the videos and those tip sheets, which we called supplementary materials, were very, very helpful to their learning. Those were sort of the 2 pieces that were the most helpful. And as I think I said before, most learners said they spent 1 to 2 hours per week on the course. A few said under an hour, and a few said over 3 to 5 hours, I think was the next one. Nobody said more than 5 hours, and I would have a hard time believing that someone who had some tech skills, that it took them more than 5 hours. So I think for some people who, the small number of people who it took a longer time, some of their technical skills and computer skills, digital literacy was something that they needed help with. So what we learned, so working with Michelle Sangara, the instructional designer, who was not part of the public legal education sector, was really important. And it was important because she helped us see, you know, even though we try as much as we can to use plain language, there's still a lot of jargon, obviously, in the plea field, and there's a lot of shortcuts that we take when speaking to each other. And so she really helped us to do things like, you know, to not use legal jargon, and to distill kind of all this information that we had down to kind of what are the essential points that you're trying to get across, and doing things like chunking the information and using some of those educational best practices that, you know, and showing us how to use those in an online platform, breaking things down into those really small pieces, while still being legally accurate and still being consistent from module to module, was really challenging. You know, we found that our legal expert, let's say in consumer law, and our legal expert in housing law would speak about things very differently. We wanted to have that consistent arc. And so while we never would obviously play with any legal accuracy, we did try to massage the way they were speaking about it. So there could be, you know, speaking about legal information, speaking about referrals, speaking about legal problems that you find people are having, encouraging them to speak in a consistent way. So that was challenging, but rewarding as well. And as I had said before, preparing the legal experts and working with them to present on video was a challenging piece. And then in terms of the participants, what we learned was there's a natural attrition rate. So we had, you know, about a 15% attrition rate. The people who registered, some of them didn't even ever start the course with, you know, all best intentions, couldn't start for whatever reason. The platform has to be so user-friendly, and that's why, as I said, we created this navigation video or navigation guide video to help people to engage with the material. So people are just, you just don't know about their skills and how used to it they are. I would say at the, you know, after 9-10 months of being in COVID and everyone, you know, so many people doing work from home on computer, I would think that, you know, everyone across the country, everyone's skills for doing work online have, you know, gone way up. So that might not be as much of a problem as it was back in 2017 when we started. definitely learned that many learners take longer than sort of the 8 weeks. So some of them would go into 9 weeks, 10 weeks, 11 weeks. We didn't want to give a very hard deadline. I mean, we did, but we really gave about maybe 4 weeks extra to some people, because there's always people who had specific reasons why they couldn't finish. And our goal was, not to punish people if they couldn't finish on time, but really to encourage people to do the work so that they could get the skills and knowledge. And so we hardly ever wanted to say no to someone in terms of finishing the course. But as I said, some don't even start and some don't finish. And then the idea that we learned a lot from the participants after the first session to make improvements to the second edition and on from there. And then a couple of unanticipated things that happened was at the very beginning, even though we knew that the pilot of the course was going to be for library staff in particular, we decided that we would create the material so that we weren't only speaking, when I say speaking, that in terms of the video content and how we presented things, as well as how the exercises and assessments were laid out. We weren't, we didn't narrow it down so that we said, library staff are a group of people who. We spoke generally to community workers, and that was something that allowed us to easily modify the course content for this broader group of community workers, like we did in the last 2 editions of the course. And that was really important because that allowed it to have a broader audience and a longer shelf life, which when you're putting money into developing video and developing websites, you want to try to make sure as much as you can that your course is going to be relevant for sort of as long as you can. And then we also found, which was surprising, I wouldn't find it as surprising since COVID, but before COVID, the fact that the learners found the course material to be relevant to their personal lives as well. People would share with me, my sister was a tenant and she was, evicted illegally, or, my mother went through a very bad separation or divorce. And so it seemed that the information that we were sharing was relevant and helpful for people in their personal lives as well as their professional lives. And then the third thing was that initially we didn't think we were going to create any hard copy material, these tip sheets or resources that people could take away. That was kind of an afterthought, or a thought a couple months before we launched the course. We thought this would be really helpful. And it's happened that the tip sheets have been not only used for the online course, but I started also incorporating them and bringing them to my in-person workshops, and now they're available on the Clio Connect site to community workers. So that was kind of a good idea that we had for the course that has really gone on to have a longer shelf life and a relevance to other training that we were doing. And then there were a few unexpected challenges. So it did take longer than anticipated to kind of convert the initial course material that I had worked with to be something that was appropriate for online learning. And the work with Michelle Sangara was frustrating at times because we felt like we were speaking different languages. So that was, we went back and forth a lot, but it really was a necessary part of the process for us to kind of see how the online learning world worked and how it was so different from in person. The technical learning curve was steep for me and for others, that worked on it in terms of how does the platform work, and I had to learn, a lot about WordPress and the background and how to make changes and things like that, which I didn't know before, but it's great that I have those learnings now. And then the other thing that we found was a challenge, and unfortunately didn't work so well, was the idea that we had for the discussion group spaces. The idea that we had that people would discuss and create a community, it really didn't happen. And I guess we didn't survey people specifically on why they didn't use the discussion group forum spaces, but they weren't mandatory. And I think the only way those spaces would have worked in our course is if we had said, you sort of have to make one comment each week. And when I've spoken to other people in the online learning world, university professors or people from other organizations, it seems that the way to that you kind of ensure discussion is by saying, you have to at least read and give one comment. So we made it totally optional. And I think, people are, juggling work and family lives and lots of things. And so the course, they did the work that they needed to do. They got out of it, each what they could. But I think the discussion group just seemed to be maybe too much of an ask for people. Some of course did use it, and there were some good discussions that happened. But we ended up dropping it for the last couple of editions of the course because we realized that it really wasn't being well used. So I would love to see how other discussion groups and forums have found success and to see what we could have done differently with that. But that was certainly one of the challenges that we found. And the last couple of challenges were that, I think I mentioned this before, that the supporting people by giving this very individualized feedback was time consuming. And it ended up taking quite a bit of my time. So I know some people who work as managers or executive directors, or, if you're wanting your staff to run a course and be the sole facilitator and instructor, I ended up accumulating lots of overtime, and which isn't typically something that Clio really allows. But we really felt strongly that we wanted to give this feedback after, offering the course. And so what we did was, after a couple of the editions, we ended up writing answer guides, as I think I showed you in that workbook. And the answer guides gave people a chance. They could sort of try to answer the question, give their thoughts, and then they could assess themselves against the answer guide. And so we only had, after the first few editions, we only had one assessment that didn't have an answer guide. That was something they submitted, and that was what I gave them feedback on. And then the second, or the last, I think that was just not even so much a challenge, but just something to know, was that to keep the content sort of alive, to keep this website going, even like, for example, this fall term, we're not offering the course. We have to continue to pay the hosting and maintenance fees for the course website. So of course the funding has long ended, and so we've rolled the course and some of those fees into other aspects of what Clio does. So just to keep that in mind. And then in terms of plans for the course for the future, so we're looking at the course and trying to figure out some creative ways to kind of add COVID-related content, to repurpose the course and kind of modify it and make it more relevant to today's world. And we want to consider offering sort of maybe not just only the course with 8 modules, but maybe offering, 1 module or 1 to 2 modules as a sort of separate mini courses. So that's what we're sort of going to be looking at in the winter. So I think that's sort of all that I wanted to share about our course, and I would be happy to talk to anybody whether you have questions today or other things come up in your own development of your courses, or other questions that you have. I'm happy to stay in touch. My email's right there for future, but I don't know if there's any questions that I can answer right now.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was fantastic. Yeah, so we have a little bit of time. I actually received a few questions in the chat for myself here, and I think one of them was on the challenges, which you answered beautifully already. So that's perfect. But I have a question here that what was your process in choosing and hiring the instructional designer? And could you please repeat her name?
Okay. So her name was Michelle Sangara. She was based in Toronto. I've lost touch with her for the last year or so. I think she's still based here, but the company is the Alina Group, A-L-I-N-A, Alina. And we interviewed, I think, three different people. We sort of, did a call out to people that we were connected with, and colleagues, people that colleagues knew, and we asked them to do a presentation to us, how they approach online learning, examples of what they've done in the past, what they thought the challenges would be, of course, like an estimated budget. And so we sort of interviewed 3 different people, and got 3 very different approaches. actually. And the Alina Group's approach was the most involved, probably the most, we chose the most challenging one, not because it was the most challenging, but because it sounded like the most engaging approach. The others were more along the lines of Moodle courses, things that used mostly people presenting, like I'm presenting to you today, and then adding some content in. So this was the most interesting and engaging approach that we found.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much, Michelle. And I think we have another question here. That's, how long did it take to film all of the modules?
So we did a lot of pre-work in terms of the filming. So the filming itself, like once we were ready to film, there was only 2 days of filming. So we had each expert in, I think, for 2 hours. So we did like, I think I was there maybe all day, or I think I did a 4-hour stint, and then maybe each of the other ones did a 2-hour stint. So there was 2 full days of filming, and we got it all done. We knew we only had 2 days, and we got it all done. But there was a big lead up to that. There were a few weeks of going back and forth in terms of the scripts. And when I say scripts, we weren't speaking directly to a script. As I said, it wasn't teleprompted, but we had really, developed along with the experts, the information, and we had kind of bulleted the points out, and we had sort of some cue cards with the bullet points so that they could kind of remember what they were, with the points that they had to hit. We had some sound issues because we actually filmed in a room at the Ontario Library Association, and there were trucks going by and all sorts of things. So sometimes the sound person who was doing the video and sound had to say, "Oh, we have to do that again. It was great, but I heard a truck go by." So it was an interesting experience that way. So it was probably a few weeks, and then we had I think at the time we did a Skype call, maybe 1 or 2 Skype calls, with each of our experts to kind of go over and solidify the information, and then, how they were going to speak to the camera and that kind of thing. And then we sent them kind of a 2-pager on what to wear, how to speak, gestures, eye contact, that kind of thing. So we, Michelle did a lot of work to help us prepare the experts for the filming.
It's funny you mentioned Skype, because I feel like that's ancient history nowadays. Or Zoom is like our main thing now. Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's great. And I think just one last question that I see here, and if there's any more, please feel free, send it in the chat or the Q&A. But I have one here. Just, could you speak to the cost involved in developing a course that looks something like this?
So, I can tell you that our funding, the funding that we got was about $40,000 or $42,000 from the Law Foundation. The second thing I can tell you to follow right up from that is that Michelle Sangar, an instructional designer, there's no way that she, first of all, she gave us a discount, kind of a nonprofit discount, but she also worked, I think, many, many more hours, and so gave a lot of those hours to us pro bono. Like, I know that she was working day and night on it, as well as, other projects at the same time. She was very eager to be involved in this course. It was not a kind of a course that she had done before. And so I feel like we got a deal. I feel like we really had a very dedicated group of people. The people from LearnBase, the company whose platform this is, that the monies that, so we had a contract with Michelle for part of that money in there, and she subcontracted with them, so we didn't pay them directly. So I don't know how much overtime they put in with her. That was sort of between the two of them, but I do feel like there was a lot of goodwill for the project, and so we got, I would say it was worth twice as much. And so if someone was going to charge twice as much for that, I wouldn't actually be surprised, because it really was quite a lot of work in development, and all of the different components were, we didn't, when we put in the funding application, we didn't realize that we were going to go with a whole platform and an instructional designer in that way. So what we probably should have done was thought it was, but hindsight's 2020. We didn't realize that going with a whole platform would mean a lot more hours of work. So in future, we would definitely apply for more, or apply for a few different sources of funding. So, yeah.
No, I think that's a good point, especially the hindsight. I mean, I guess this is all trial and error for everyone kind of
Well,
delving.
yeah, I mean, I think initially we thought we'll have 8 webinars and they'll be great, and they'll, we'll add some exercises to them, and that will be our course. And so in terms of staff time and development, it wasn't, sort of supposed to be as involved as it became. So our initial thought of what it would be, and obviously when you apply for funding, things often change from what you deliver. And in this case, I think we delivered something that was much more involved and engaging and maybe worthwhile than what we initially thought we would deliver.
Exactly. Perfect. That's great. And we have some good feedback in the chat. Thanks, Joel, for that. And anyways, just kind of a shout out from Saskatchewan. So that's lovely. And I think it looks like that might be all the questions that I see here just at this time. But Michelle, that's some really helpful information. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. It was really insightful and the presentation was fantastic, of course. I just want to repeat, as I mentioned at the start, that the recording is going to get sent out. I know we have, individuals that would have loved to join today, but of course times are are busy. But in any case, I will also send around Michelle's slide deck. And if anyone has questions or wants to connect with Michelle directly, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I know everyone here essentially has my contact information. Michelle's email is right there as well. As Michelle said, you can reach out to her directly too, but I'm also happy to connect you if you kind of miss it. But in any case, this sort of wraps up our last webinar, or CLIAC's last webinar for 2020. The holidays are fast approaching. I do hope that everyone has some time to rest, take care of both your, mental health, your overall health. And you will hear from us again in the new year on some continued programming. So please stay tuned and watch out for that. But in the meantime, Michelle, again, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. This was great. And to everyone else who's joined, have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.